Good.
I'm not joking, I was literally standing in water of this.
I don't want to know all
I'm
that.
not joking.
Okay, ready to go?
My traders are made out of material on top as well, so if they want to just
Yeah, you don't want to go in there. That's why I had to like go in this really shallow boots. Like it was big. If I didn't have a video,
Well, I know it's my stick, but everybody is welcome to this.
that's half after you guys, but it's half percent more.
On behalf of Windermere Lake Cruises, we'd like to welcome you aboard. Please listen carefully to the following safety announcement. This vessel has a full complement of life-saving equipment, comprising of life rings, self-inflating life rafts and buoyancy tanks, loosely attached to the top deck, designed to float free in a case of an emergency. Downstairs in the lower saloon we have a full complement of life jackets under the marked seats. All emergency exits are clearly marked. They comprise of the windows down the sides of the boat, the two doors either side of the steering position, and the door at the back of the cabin. If you're outside on the top deck, please do not stand on the seats or lean over the safety rails. And if you're downstairs in the lower saloon, please do not lean over the windows. If you've got children on board, they need to be accompanied at all times by an adult and not allowed to run around the vessel. This is not only for their own safety, but for the comfort of all other passengers. Windermere Lake Cruises has a non-smoking policy, which includes the use of e-cigarettes. In the very unlikely event of an emergency, all we ask is you stay seated and calm and follow the instructions given out by the crew. You're travelling on Windermere, England's largest lake. It's 10.5 miles long, by a mile wide at its widest and 220 feet deep. The deepest and the widest part of the lake are in the northern basin, as Windermere is split into two deep water basins by the group of islands that lie just off Bowness. 12 of Windermere's 18 islands to be found in the central part of the lake, and the lake has 4 main rivers that feed it, 3 of which are in the northern basin, the Brovey, the Rothy, and the Trampbeck halfway up the northern basin. And there's only one main river that feeds the lake in the southern basin, and that's the River Cunseybeck. And that's about a mile south of Bowness. And then the lake flows down to Lakeside, where it becomes the River Leven. It drops 130 feet over 5 miles out into Walton Bay onto the Irish Sea. Experts tell us it takes between 8 to 9 months to walk to the furthest northern point of the lake and the furthest southern point of the lake. So, good afternoon ladies and gentlemen, and welcome aboard Miss Westmoreland for this 45-minute island cruise. For your convenience, we have toilets on the back deck, and down in the lower saloon we have a fully licensed refreshment bar. For sale we've got tea, coffee, hot chocolate, a selection of alcoholic beverages, a selection of soft drinks and snacks. Also available behind the bar is the commentary guidebook, priced at £2.50, telling you in more detail about the 3 main cruises you can do on the lake, and it's full of coloured photographs and information about the lake and its surroundings. Also, for those who like a nice walk, there's the Discovery Walk book, detailing walks around the shores of Windermere and the surrounding area, also available behind the bar. So coming into view ahead of us and over to the right are 3 islands. The small island ahead of us is known as Henholme. The large middle island is Ladyholme, and the one in the distance to the right is Roughholme. A few hundred years ago there was a chapel built on Ladyholme for the local lord of the manor. He installed 2 priests to pray for his family. He gave them 2 fishing boats and 10 fishing nets. He also gave them hens that they kept on the neighbouring island of Henholme, hence its name. Today Ladyholme is home to the Windermere cormorants, who eat twice their weight in fish and can dive to depths of 45 metres. To help them dive to those depths, they do not have waterproof feathers, but because they eat so much fish, it makes their droppings very acidic. So after they've been fishing, they land in the branches of the trees to dry their wings. They do the inevitable, which strips the bark from the trees, eventually killing them. They're quite a pest round the shores of Windermere. In some cultures, canny fishermen actually train the cormorants to fish for them and bring the fish back to their boats. So looking ahead and over to the right, you'll see the further expanse of the northern basin. It's about 4.5 miles from here up to Waterhead Bay, where you'll find the landing stage for the small town of Ambleside. The large mountainous range at the head of the lake is the Fairfield Horseshoe. It rises 2,864 feet above sea level, and it's the seat of one of the glaciers that carved out Windermere over 13,000 years ago. Experts tell us that the ice in this part of the British Isles was up to half a mile thick. So we've left the busy eastern shoreline behind and heading across the quieter western shoreline. The wooded hillside ahead of us is known as Clay Heights, and it stretches 4 miles down this western shoreline. And it was once owned by the famous children's author Beatrix Potter. She didn't like what was happening on the shoreline behind, wealthy merchants moving up, buying plots of land and building big houses on them. So she made it her lifelong quest to buy as much land on this western side of the lake as she possibly could. She happened to meet and marry a William Heelis, who was a land agent. Every time one of the farmers wanted to sell their land or farm on this side of the lake, they would speak to William. William would speak to his wife Beatrix, and she would pay more than the developers were willing to pay, hence protecting this shoreline for many years and hopefully many years to come. On her death in the early 1940s, she'd accumulated over 4,000 acres of land and 14 farms that she left to the nation through the National Trust. Today the wooded hillside is run and managed by the National Trust Forestry Commission, and they inform us that there's at least one sample of every tree native to the British Isles grows here. There is one small white cottage ahead of us on the shoreline known as Strawberry Gardens. At one time it was a market garden growing and selling strawberries, and it was popular for people to row out from Bowness to buy them. Today it's owned by the National Trust and it's used as a holiday let. The 2 islands to our left here, the small one is known as Walsholme and the larger one is Windermere's second largest island, known as Thompsonholme. Not all of Thompsonholme is naturally forming. This end nearest to us is actually man-made to help protect the moored boats from the strong northerly winds. On board who likes a nice walk, there's a 4.5 mile walk along this western shoreline, and it runs from Ray Castle in the north to Ferry House in the south, and it keeps close to the shoreline most of the way up and takes you through the wooded hillside. The best way to access that walk at the moment is to take a boat from Bowness up to Ambleside and then one across to Ray Castle. Maybe visit the castle before you start the shoreline walk. And And then when you get to Ferry House, you just take the car ferry back to Bowness. If anybody's interested in doing that walk and would like information on it, just have a word with them back at the ticket office and they'll be happy to help you.
Alana, sit down there. Sit down. Guys, this vlog is going to be a long one, as you could hear it. It's going to be a 45-minute journey. So hopefully you stay tuned to the end and see the whole lake.
Through the gap in the island, you'll see Windermere's largest and only inhabited island, known as Bell Isle. It's 3/4 of a mile long and covers an area of 37 acres, and it's home to the famous roundhouse, built in 1774. When the house was first built, it wasn't much liked by the locals. They hadn't seen a roundhouse in this part of the country before. The famous local William Wordsworth put a blot on the landscape and gave it the nickname the Pepperpot. For this reason, the islanders at the time were asked to plant the trees round the island to obscure the house from view. But not only did the trees obscure the house from view for many months of the year, they also made the island look private. So I'm not sure who actually won out on that. The house and the island were the property of the Curwen family for over 220 years. Before they purchased the island, it was known as Longholm. John Curwen renamed the island Bell Isle after his wife Isabella. And then the house and island changed hands in the early 1990s. It's now owned by a local businessman. As we pass these two islands to our left, if you look between them and cross the bar, got a glimpse of the roundhouse through a gap in the trees. Later in the year, when the leaves fall from the trees, you can see the house and the island a lot clearer.
In between those two
here are collectively known as the lilies
islands,
of the
there is the
They
house.
take their name from the lilies that used to grow upon them. It was popular in the 1920s for courting couples to row out from Bowness, pick the lilies that grew on the islands, and even propose. But due to the overpicking of the flowers, they no longer grow on either of the islands. They're still collectively known as the lilies of the valley.
Can you come with me? Let me show you something. Please? It's beautiful, isn't it? We see a good view. There's the people watching.
Alana, ducks in the water. There you go. There they are.
Look how black one. I've never seen anything like that one. Like that.
Oh, the cruise is turning around now. I think we're gonna head backwards in between the islands. Hopefully, I don't know. Some private boats and yachts.
1879 as the Ferry House Hotel. It was built to give passengers who missed the last ferry a stay so they could collect the first ferry in the morning. It's had a couple of uses since being a hotel. It was the headquarters to the Freshwater Biological Association from the early 1950s to 2006, when they moved to the annex alongside, and then it became 13 luxury apartments. So having just passed Windermere's largest registered island, you're about to see Windermere's smallest registered island. First coming into view ahead of us, and then on our right hand side, what looks like a tumble down tree is actually Maidenhome. And Maidenhome used to come right out to the red buoys that surround it. But due to storm damage and water erosion, the tumble down tree is all we have left of Maidenhome. It still qualifies as the smallest registered island on the lake.
This right here, the tree.
Oh my word.
The smallest island in Lake District, this fallen tree.
So as we've been making our way around, you'll have noticed a lot of sailing boats moored on the lake. And responsible sailing boat owners check their boats regularly to make sure their ropes are not too tight and that they're not taking on water. But coming into view on the right, surrounded by 3 buoys, is the mast of a sailing boat. And at the bottom of that mast is a complete sailing boat. And this is what happens if you do not look after your boat. As that boat's waiting to be recovered to the surface and probably scrapped. So the island coming into view now on the right hand side is known as Crowhome. Locally it's got the nickname of Dog Kennel Island, as when the Ferry House is the Ferry House Hotel.
Yeah, the
The
boat
proprietor kept his foxhounds on
has
the
gone under
island.
the water, that
I
one.
expect when there was a hunt he would get one of the staff to row across, collect the hounds from the island, returning them the same way afterwards. I doubt he ever got his hands wet doing that task. Today Crowhome is the nesting ground for swans and other wild birds from around the lake.
Mermaids.
Yeah.
There will be some mermaids in the water. Hopefully.
Have a whales,
There could be.
sharks,
Could be.
dolphins. There could be dolphins.
Could be.
I could ride on a dolphin, or mermaid could ride on dolphins.
So coming into view on the right is the annex of the Freshwater Biological Association moved to. They've just moved again down to the YMCA down at the lakeside. And they've just sold the empty office building, sold the seat for £1.3 million.
This has been sold for £1.3 million.
Apartments like the rest of the ferry house.
There's no such thing as those. Mermaids are real. It's not made up.
So coming into view on the right, on the hillside, is the ruin of Lakeland. Is the ruin of Playfair viewing station, built in 1790 as a
If
folly.
you guys can see it, it was built in 1700s.
1930s and 40s as a dinner and tea dance venue. In the central part there, where you can see some people stood, was a drawing room. And in the drawing room, they'd put coloured glass in the windows to give the visitors an impression of the lake at different times and different seasons of the year. They had yellow glass for summer, orange for autumn, A light green for a spring day, light blue for
I will
winter
try to show you guys
and a
from
dark
outside.
green for a moonlit night. And a lilac tint to give the impression of the lake during a thunderstorm. The viewing station fell out of favour in the district towards the end of the 19th century. But a few years ago, the National Trust shored up the walls of the building and installed a viewing platform. They've even got panels of coloured glass and window frames. Give the impression that the visitors can see the lake. After once it's set up, and you can get to the entire plaza. As you look at the cafe, you make your way up to it. So the section of lake we're going through at the moment is known as the Midwater Shallows. You'll see a lot of red buoys with poles with triangles on in the middle of them. And the red buoys are marking shallow water less than 2 metres, and the poles are marking rocks. And the rocks in this part of the lake have some unusual names. We've got Oven Bottom, Bullhead, Chicken Rock, and even Hen Rock. We're not quite sure where they get those names from.
These waters are deep. I think he said about 250 meters at some places.
Daddy, there's a sign. I went to walk. I went to walk there.
Well, the house coming into view on the right-hand side is known as Felborough, and the section nearest to us was built in the 1890s, and the further section in the 1990s. Quite a lot of work done to it over the last few years.
This house was built in the 1800s.
They've also done a boathouse.
I'm not sure if you could hear the commentary.
Last time I looked, you could rent the boathouse. About 300.
There's a dance. There's a dance. Dance floor.
I think this house will be worth millions now, millions. I'm not sure at the moment. I think it's still going forward.
Daddy, can we see Wales?
Yeah.
This water was raining.
No. There's mermaids are in there.
Are you saying that water is cold and mermaids aren't real?
Then the lake becomes the River Leven and it flows out into Morecambe Bay and on out into the Irish Sea. Before we cross the lake and follow the eastern shoreline back to Bowness, the island coming into view ahead of us is known as Lingholm. It takes its name from the wild heather that grows upon it. Just to the right of Lingholm is the mouth of the River Cumsey, the main river that feeds the lake in this southern basin. The other three main rivers that feed the lake are behind us in the northern basin.
I think we are turning back now to Bowness. This is another island.
Daddy, I'm gonna get something from your bag.
So as we make our way across the lake, looking straight ahead of us, at the top of the grassy bank there is the house, known as Broadleaves, built in 1898 for a wealthy colliery owner from Yorkshire.
Remember when you
It became the headquarters to the Windermere Motorboat Racing Club in the early 1950s, believed to be the oldest motorboat racing club in the world. And it was founded back in Bowness Bay in 1925. And it's had some famous members over the years. It had Sir Henry Seagrave, who broke the world water speed record here on Windermere in 1930. It had Sir Malcolm and Donald Campbell, who broke world water speed records on Coniston, about 5 miles west of here. Also had a Norman Buckley, not quite so well known as the other gentleman. And he was also responsible for record attempts here on Windermere, but he was actually the official or head timekeeper for Donald Campbell's record attempts on Coniston. The Windermere Motorboat Racing Club don't do much of the racing here on Windermere anymore, as in 2005 a 10 knot speed limit was introduced. Most of the racing happens in the docks at Barrow, but occasionally they do lift the speed limit and let them do a bit of racing back here on Windermere, but not very often. To give you a bit of an idea on property prices on this eastern shoreline, coming into view ahead of us are two boat houses of similar size. The one nearest to us sold early last year for £50,000 short of £2 million. And it's just got a 1-bedroom apartment above a wet dock.
said this one coming up on the right.
And from the boathouses we go to the house in the corner known as Grey Gables, built in 2015 for a wealthy lady from Wales who made her fortune through the comparison websites. Today Grey Gables is a holiday let and you can rent it out in low season for about £7,500 a week. It goes up to over £10,000 a week in high season. It has got 5 ensuite bedrooms, so maybe split between a few friends, maybe not quite so bad. And then from Grey Gables we go to the large cream building about to peer between the trees, known as Stores Hall. Built in 1790 for a wealthy Yorkshire landowner known as Sir John Legard. By 1804 it was the property of a David Pike Watts, uncle to the famous artist John Constable, who actually stayed in a cottage in the grounds of Stores in 1806. By 1808 it was the property of a wealthy shipping merchant from Liverpool known as John Bolton. And then in 1890 it became the Stores Hall Hotel. And from Stores Hall we go to the stone building on the end of the stone jetty, known as Stores Temple, or the Temple of Heroes, built in 1804 to commemorate naval victories in the Napoleonic Wars. On 4 of its 8 sides are the names of the admirals of the day. We've got Duncan, Vincent, Nelson and Howe. In 2009 and again in 2015 we had severe flooding here in the Lake District. To give you an idea how high the water rose, it actually covered the arches on the temple. And all that was visible above the water was the wooden section at the top. And it stayed at that level for a few days. And the floodwater was responsible for a lot of damage around the shores of the lake.
Cool.
So looking over to the right you'll see a wooden jetty, and if you look up that jetty you'll see Stores Hall from the other side. Quite a popular wedding venue. Quite often one of our boats will be chartered to take the wedding party for a cruise out on the lake.
Just hold that. Hold that. Just film it.
So most of the properties on this shoreline are privately owned, they're private residents, but there's a large white house coming into view on top of the hill known as Blackwell. Built in 1900 for a wealthy Manchester brewer known as Sir Edward Holt. It's had several uses since he lived there. It was a school for many years and then it became office space. And then in 1999 it was purchased by the Lakeland Arts Trust and opened to the public in 2001 as an arts and crafts venue. You actually pay to look around the arts and crafts house itself. It's normally got an exhibition of some sort or another taking place there. And it's also got a cafe with outdoor seating overlooking the lake. To give you another idea how high the water rose in the floods, coming into view on the right is what looks like a bungalow with a boathouse attached to it. The water was actually lapping just under the balcony on the boathouse. the shoreline coming into view on the right hand side is known as Stores. Locally it's got the nickname of Millionaire's Row. So if you were to try and buy one of the boat houses with accommodation above, they'd start at around the £2 million mark. The houses themselves rise from that point upwards. One of the newest houses to be built on the shoreline is the one we're passing now. Built towards the end of 2018 and rumoured to have cost over £3 million to build. What's happening now is you're not allowed to build on an open plot of land anymore. So people are buying the older traditional properties, knocking them down and building one of these modern houses in its place. And it's up to you whether you think it's an improvement on the older traditional properties around the shoreline. So the island coming into view on our left hand side is known as Rampome, and it takes its name from the wild garlic that grew upon it. It's also a popular nesting ground for grey heron. As we've been making our way around this afternoon, you'll notice a lot of the islands end in the word home, H-O-L-M-E. It's actually an old Norse word that roughly translates to island, and that language dates back to when the Vikings ruled this area. So looking ahead of us, we've got a good view of the central fells of the Lake District. The run of fells running away from us on the right hand side is known as the High Street Range, and it takes its name from the Roman road that ran along the top of it. At the time, the Romans thought it safer to build a road on top of the fells, partly due to the risk of ambush in the valleys below, but also because the valleys were very treed and very boggy at that time.
Ready? Let's see how high you can jump. Wow. You dancing? Teddy, let's see if you can jump this high. Jump this high. Jump, jump.
The large green and white vessel about to cross the lake over to the right there is the Windermere car ferry known as the Mallard. Started operating here on the lake in 1990, and it's licensed to carry 18 cars and 100 foot passengers. By using this ferry, you save a 14-mile round trip around the northern end of the lake if you're making your way to the small village of Hawkshead. But records show there's been a ferry of some sort or another at this point on the lake for over 500 years. But this present ferry pulls itself across the lake via two steel cables, picking them up at the front and dropping them down behind. For that reason, we tend to give it a wide berth, as it's rather embarrassing getting suspended on those cables. you probably realise, we've come round the other side of Belle Isle, the largest island on the lake. And if you look over to the left into the trees, you should be able to make out the roof of the roundhouse and maybe be able to see why William Wordsworth gave it the nickname the Pepper Pot.
Steady now.
Are you enjoying it,
The house
Isa?
itself is also known as
Good.
a calendar house, as it has 12 rooms for the 12 months of the year. It has 4 sculptures for the 4 seasons of the year. And it has 52 windows for the weeks of the year, with 365 panes of glass in those windows for the days of the year.
Is it good, Iris? Happy?
Yes. He was ready.
Jump, jump, jump.
I should not slide the door.
First island to come into view is the island of Snake Cove, and then towards the end of Belle Isle is the island of Barhoe. Although they look part of Belle Isle, they are actually islands within their own right. So ladies and gentlemen, in a few minutes time we'll be back alongside the pier at Bowness. In the interest of safety, if I could ask you to stay seated or find a seat from this point on until we're fully secured alongside the pier, and I'll let you know when it's safe to stand and leave the vessel. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now safe to stand and leave the vessel. Just mind your step onto the pier. Thank you.
Hold on these hands.